It is a calm Hawaiian dawn, December 7th, 1941. The air above Oahu is cool and still, with only the faintest clouds on the horizon. A waning moon, pale and fragile, dips behind the mountain peaks as the eastern sky turns from indigo to lavender. Far out on the Pacific, the ocean lies smooth and silver. Fishers on their boats are returning with their morning catch, none aware of the storm on the way. On the remote, jungle-covered ridge of Opana Point, 2 U.S. Army privates stand at silent attention. Private Joseph Lockard, slender and keen-eyed in his crisp olive drab, scans the sea with nervous hope. Beside him is Private George Elliott, Jr., broad-shouldered and watchful, squinting toward the distance. Both carry rifles slung at their sides, though their real tools are the equipment in the trailer behind them. Nothing seems amiss here. Trade winds stir the palm fronds, distant roosters crow in the valleys, and the world is still asleep. Neither young man imagines how, in just a few hours, the sky will be torn apart in fire and steel, and how the faint green dots on Lockard's radar screen will become a legend of near-missed destiny. The object of their vigilance is a monstrous machine. 4 heavy trailers have been parked carefully on the grass clearing, each housing parts of the new SCR-270 long-range radar set. One contains massive generators, another the radio transmitters, a third the receiving equipment, and a flatbed trailer holds the antenna. In daylight, its sheer size was obvious. Even now, folded like a metal origami, it looks like the skeleton of a steel behemoth. When fully deployed, its latticework tower will rise over 50 feet tall, higher than a 2-story house, with a great dish at the top pointing to the sky. Private Lockard helped his sergeant hand crank up the last section only last night, joking, "This thing's bigger than the barn back home." Now in the growing light, he peers at it proudly. Each steel element is anchored firmly, cable secured to the ground. The radar is a strange blessing, incongruous among the palm trees, but the Army's very eyes on the horizon. As the first pink and orange streaks of dawn touch the antenna's metal, Lockard feels a shiver of anticipation. This massive machine could someday save lives. He just hopes those lives include the men below. This is the SCR-270 radar, a marvel of early electronic warfare. It does not see in any ordinary sense. Instead, it sends out pulses of invisible radio energy. Every few milliseconds, the antenna blasts a brief flash of radio waves straight across the Pacific. These pulses race outward at the speed of light, faster than any jet. If one of those pulses strikes an object, an island, a ship, or an airplane, a tiny echo of energy bounces back. Back in the truck, which serves as the command and control van, that echo is caught by a sensitive receiver. On Lockard's console, a round oscilloscope display glows softly green, like a blackboard brushed by light. Each returning echo makes a bright green dot on that face. The scope's arm slowly revolves in a continuous circle, sweeping the sky in every direction. For Lockard and Elliott at the controls, each blip or cluster of blips is like a ghostly outline. The pulsing dots are the only evidence of real objects far beyond human sight. The 2 privates have been trained to read these symbols as though they were silhouettes in the clouds. Already they can tell a ship from a plane by how bright or scattered the blip is, though they have only practiced on friendly aircraft and ocean swells. This morning, the radar is their silent partner, humming quietly under their hands, and they treat it with a reverence as if it were alive. Above them, the sky continues to brighten. Dawn slips steadily up from the sea. Across town, Honolulu streetlights are still off, and island life begins to stir in the faint light. Here on Opana Hill, the noises of morning slowly come to life. A rooster somewhere in the distance crows its wake-up call. The lapping of calm waves on shore drifts up on the breeze, and the faint, sharp tang of salt and dew fills their lungs. Overhead, flocks of starlings twitter as they return to roost. The air is still and almost unnaturally calm.
A single cloud above the Cool-Out Mountains glows pink in the dawn. It is a beautiful morning, one that would have any local thinking to themselves, how could anything go wrong today? Yet Lockhart has a prickle of unease in his gut. Not far from this ridge, across the harbor, the mighty battleships of the U.S. Pacific Fleet slipped their lines behind Ford Island. Out at sea, the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, out of radio range, is shadowing a Japanese reconnaissance force. Tension crackles in the Pacific air, even as the Hawaiian breeze seems indifferent. Somehow, Lockhart feels both soothed and alarmed by the serenity. Indeed, just to the south, not everyone is relaxed. In late 1939, American commanders had scrambled to prepare for the possibility of war in the Pacific. Colonel Wilfred Tetley championed the Aircraft Warning Service for Hawaii. By 1941, 6 radar sites had been constructed around Oahu, rimming the island with hidden mechanical eyes. On this Sunday morning, however, most of those stations are silent. The routine orders called for radar crews to power down at 7 a.m. for breakfast and day off. Only Opana's unit had kept running a bit later, to get our bearings, one sergeant joked. So when the clock hands in Lockhart's truck sweep past 7, he and Elliot find themselves on duty alone. They do not yet know it, but for the next hour, their radar will be the only alarm sounding for all of Pearl Harbor. Private Joseph Lockhart, the first soldier, is methodical and alert. His dark eyes scan the western horizon where the sun is about to break. 2 months ago, he had been an engineering student back in Pennsylvania, wondering at this new science of radar. Now, in the clear Hawaiian dawn, he feels the gravity of his role for the first time. Next to him, Private George Elliott Jr., younger and sturdier, tries to keep his face calm. Elliott lights a cigarette and takes it easy. He had been a sprinter on his high school track team, certain he'd never get used to early mornings in camouflage. Yet both men have volunteered to be on watch duty. Lockhart asked for additional hours, curious and eager. Elliott's drill sergeant had practically thrown him in here, knowing him to be steady under pressure. In their fatigue-stained uniforms, they look nothing like seasoned warriors. Still, beneath their helmets are trained eyes. If anything appears on their screens, the Army expects them to react.
Inside the radar trailer, it is warm and cramped. Lockhart and Elliot sit on a narrow bench before the control panel, backs to the door. A single yellow bulb overhead casts more shadows than light. The instruments, dials, switches, neon lights, hum with life. Lockhart idly traces his fingers over the cool metal knobs of the receiver. Taped to the metal wall beside the screen is a faded Caribbean map, scribbled with last week's training tracks. Another small pocket holds spare bulbs, a pencil, and extra sheets of plotting paper. The sound of the generator's engine is a constant rumble under their feet, steady like a heartbeat. Both men drink bitter black coffee from chipped tin mugs. This coffee is a ritual at sunrise, helping steel them for the monotony of training, not for what is about to happen. Each private has done every drill, of dialing in the frequency, adjusting the gain, emptying the heat of the vacuum tubes. Neither can predict what effect those routines will have when echoes turn into reality. Lockhart pulls up a schematic chart of the island. He taps at the scope's controls. "All right, all stations quiet," he mutters. "We're on watch, Elliot." Elliot gives him a half smirk. "Wish we had someone to talk to. Last night felt longer. I don't trust morning dulls." Lockhart glances at the clock. 06:59. Elliot yawns and adjusts the antenna's elevation a hair, though their assigned sector is broad. All is calm, eerily so. Off to the north, beyond the next ridge of the island, nothing is visible but sea haze. The two men quietly concentrate on their instruments, expecting perhaps to turn them off in minutes as ordered. They imagine, half awake, that their main task might be to catch a stray flock of migrating geese on radar, or count the test flights of American B-17 bombers coming in from the mainland. Then, at the stroke of 7, Lockhart will wire up the rest of his gear and conclude the shift. But he is uneasy. Something about the silence. It could be nothing, he thinks, or perhaps something big. Only time will tell. Suddenly, at 7:02, the world of routine cracks open. Elliot's eyes narrow. A tiny green dot has appeared on the oscilloscope's display. It hovers near the edge of the screen where the anti-aircraft gun farms would be if friendly planes were to come. "Joe, do you see that?" Elliot whispers, pointing. Lockhart snaps out of his thoughts. The needle of the radar sweeps around as usual, and each time it passes, that dot returns. It is moving on a steady bearing. Within seconds, more dots join it, forming a short line of flickers creeping across the display. Lockhart's heart suddenly skips a beat. "By Jove," he says softly. "That's not a bird." The green pinpoints are arrayed like sequins on a spider's web, making an unmistakable formation. "It's an enormous formation," he murmurs under his breath. Neither can believe their eyes. The machine is showing a solid group of aircraft, and they are heading straight towards Oahu, dozens upon dozens of them. Lockhart wastes no time. He grabs the wired telephone handset mounted on the wall of the trailer. His voice is calm but urgent as he dials the central switchboard. In the quiet of the morning, the static crackling through the speaker makes his own voice sound strange to him. "Opana Station to Information Center," he calls. He repeats it twice to be sure. On the other end, Private Joseph McDonald, on late duty at Fort Shafter's Aircraft Information Center, snaps awake. The radio room at Shafter is Spartan. A wooden table with a single field telephone, antenna masts outside, and a rotating map of the island on the wall. McDonald has caffeine in one hand and a logbook in the other. He hears Lockhart's urgent words, "We have dozens of aircraft coming in from the north," and perks up immediately. McDonald's stomach drops. At that hour, his shift should have been ending. Dazed, he scribbles a quick note. "Opana, large number of planes north." But by the time he turns, Tyler, the duty lieutenant, is entering the tent.
Lieutenant Kermit Tyler is 27 years old, handsome and confident, the kind of man who always keeps his hair perfectly in place under his cap. On this morning, he's clean-shaven and alert, ready for briefing. He hands over a phone and walks out to talk quietly with McDonald. Tyler is a fighter pilot transferred to this desk. He knows little of radar. Inside his office, a canvas tent really, there's a radio broadcasting island music, a chalkboard with the day's schedule, and not much else. Already he has heard talk of a flight of B-17 bombers from California. He checks the radio. The same sweet Hawaiian tunes are on the broadcast. Tyler has been told that if those bombers are inbound, the radio would cut to welcome them. The uninterrupted music seems to confirm it. That means friendly planes are due. So when McDonald tells Tyler of Lockhart's call, Tyler assumes the only reasonable explanation. Tyler says into the phone, speaking more to himself than the junior soldier, "It's just those B-17s circling in. Don't worry." He sounds sure and calm. A pause. "Yes, just our bombers." Lockhart hears it clearly through the line. "Don't worry about it, it's nothing." In the trailer, Lockhart blanches. His grip on the handset tightens. They have just seen hundreds of unknown planes, and now he is being told to treat it as nothing. "Sir," he begins desperately, but Tyler's clipped voice comes back, final. "I said, don't worry, Private, stand down." With that, the line disconnects. There is a long, heavy silence. Neither man moves. All they can hear now is the faint hum of the machines and their own heartbeat. Elliot exhales in disbelief. "Don't worry," he echoes bitterly, shaking his head. He really said that. Lockhart presses the receiver back onto its cradle, sending a click through the speaker. The scope remains alight with the steady procession of green dots, crawling closer with each sweep. Lockhart can taste copper blood in his mouth. He and Elliot exchange a look, a mixture of anger, shock, and the sickening realization of what is unfolding. Everything Lockhart believed about this machine and his duty now hangs by a thread. Protocol says they should quit tracking. The lieutenant told them to. Yet every instinct screams that something dire is about to occur. Neither soldier is one to disobey a superior,
But for a split second, they stand frozen between orders and moral necessity. At last, Elliot breaks the spell. "Well," he says quietly, eyes still on the scope, "we better get it on record anyway." He's talking to Lockard and himself. Lockard nods, too furious to speak, and produces a pencil. They fling a fresh sheet onto the logboard and start tracing the contacts again. Each time the blip reappears, Elliot measures and marks its position. Lockard calls out range and bearing for each sighting. In solemn silence, they let nothing slip. Now they know what most people on the island do not know. Coming down from the sky, right at this moment, is a large formation of aircraft, clearly hostile. They hastily jot down distances. At 7:06, the lead elements are 150 miles out. At 7:15, they're 92 miles. By 7:30, barely 40 miles remain. None of this stops, shakes, or misses. The radar, unchanged, whirs on at regular intervals. Lockard and Elliot continue to serve it as if nothing had happened, only this time they work with grim resolve. Each calculated fix puts their dread in black and white. Time stretches taut. The two soldiers feel the quiet shifting into chaos beneath them. The sun is fully peaking above the horizon now, burning off the last shadows. Still, nothing on the horizon betrays what they know is there. They check and recheck their figures in disbelief. Lockard rubs his eyes. "We gotta do something," he breathes. "But what?" The information center has been told it's nothing. Other radar sites are shut down. All they can do is keep watching. Every 5 seconds, the antenna finds the target anew, and every 5 seconds, Lockard plots it. Then, abruptly, at about 7:48, the track on the scope disappears. The line of dots is gone, and for a chilling reason. The formation has entered the radar's blind spot, hiding behind the solid bulk of Oahu's northern mountains. Lockard and Elliot know exactly what that means. "Here they come," Elliot says softly. Suddenly, the morning silence shatters. A deep, thunderous boom rolls up from below. Far off, the ground seems to rumble under that mighty sound, the first bombs hitting Wheeler Field. Flares bloom over the sea. On the ridge, Lockard and Elliot grab for the truck's horns and radios. Out of a thick nearby vine grows the first tracery of black smoke. Now they see them with naked eyes, hundreds of planes, black shapes against the dawn sky, banking and diving toward the harbor. Torpedo planes sweep low just beyond the trees. Fighters streak high overhead with red discs on their wings. It is exactly as the radar said it was, only much, much closer. In the open air now, Lockard cannot contain himself. He hunches forward, cupping his hands to his mouth to shout, "They're here! They're at Pearl Harbor!"
Elliot, wide-eyed, leaps behind a concrete barricade near the trailer. Around them, the world has become chaotic. Lockard starts the truck and speeds down the service road. The roar of engines and depth charges now deafens them. Lockard barrels down toward the harbor, tires throwing up gravel, oblivious to orders or regulations. Trucks of other soldiers weave in panic as he and Elliot race through the base. Lockard tries the radio again, yelling, static. But the airwaves are full of confusion and chaos. He flashes headlights to warn trucks. In the distance, a torpedo skips and splashes alongside a battleship. Stunned by the sight, Lockard slams his fists on the wheel. "It's real, Elliot," he snarls. "We really saw it." Within minutes, they come across huddled anti-air crews and fleeing mechanics. Elliot's voice trembles as he tells a passing sergeant, "Enemy plane south of here." Soldiers drop to the ground, firing up at silhouettes arcing overhead. Shell fragments clatter on Lockard's windshield. After one long, horrifying loop, the Japanese planes begin to recede toward the west. In a haze of shock, Lockard and Elliot finally step out of the truck together. The sky above is eerily empty once more. They stand on quivering legs among civilians scrambling for cover. Flames rise from Pearl's big guns and oil tanks. The harbor has become a smoldering battlefield. Their hands are shaky and stained with oil and blood. In the later quiet, Lockard finds Elliot crouched behind the truck, staring at the black smoke of Hickam Field in the distance. "We did everything right," Lockard says grimly, more to himself than to the shaken Elliot. "We saw them, radioed it in, but nobody listened." Elliot doesn't answer, staring off at a flickering horizon. Around them, wounded men are being carried past, groaning and covered in ashes. A medic kneels to attend a sailor with a gash in his face. From over the ridge comes the distant echo of sirens and the angry stutter of anti-aircraft fire. Too late to change what's happening now. For Lockard and Elliot, those final radar echoes have turned into reality. The lines of green dots they traced all morning were planes screaming overhead. The quivers in their knees are not from exhaustion, but from the sheer grief and regret that they could not pass on a warning in time. In the calm that finally follows the chaos, the truth is undeniable. The American fleet at Pearl lies burning because the first warning came and was ignored. In the hours and days ahead, this detail will become legend. For now, Lockard and Elliot remain stunned. They exchange a hollow smile, and Elliot forces a nod. No words can sum up the tragedy they have witnessed. Instead, they stand silently, listening to the crackling of small fires around them, suddenly feeling very old and very young at once. In the aftermath, every officer at Shafter and Pearl comes to hear what they saw. Officers in crisp uniforms pore over the shaky logs. Lockard and Elliot are brought to bare concrete tables and ask the same questions over and over, like ghosts summoned to relive the nightmares. They speak softly, describing every blip, every knob they turned, every second they held. The investigators pore over the transcripts of Tyler's words. Some shake their heads in understanding. The final consensus is clear. The radar worked perfectly. It saw the Japanese planes first. It was the chain of command and a mistaken assumption that failed. Lieutenant Tyler would later explain to the board that he believed he was helping, relying on what he thought was the only logical answer. He was not punished, but the report sternly concludes that information was not acted upon when it should have been. In official terms, it's phrased delicately, but one phrase in the conclusions stands out. The instruments did not fail. It was the human element that broke down. Publicly, word of the ghost plot spreads only slowly. The nation is in shock, grieving the fallen and the charred remains of beloved ships. But by early 1942, newspapers run a startling headline. "Radar man warned of attack was ignored." It names Joe Lockard and recounts the morning's events. Lockard is reluctant, but attends a small ceremony where a general pins a Distinguished Service Medal to his uniform. Elliot is lauded by colleagues and eventually receives a commendation, though he will later say, "I was just doing my duty." Neither of the two ever craves the spotlight. In interviews, they insist they were only doing their jobs, just a couple of soldiers at a desk. For a short time, Lockard is nicknamed the Paul Revere of Pearl Harbor, though he finds the comparison both absurd and poignant. Years later, he'll say quietly, "We were just two kids and a radio. We saw what was coming."
The true legacy of their morning, however, is bigger than any medal. The shock of Pearl Harbor changes the military's whole attitude toward technology. The old notion that a radar blip could be a fluke is discarded. Across the Pacific and around the globe, Americans begin building dozens of additional radar stations. On every island and at every harbor, the machines are kept running day and night. Protocols are rewritten so that any contact, friend or foe, is treated as real until proven otherwise. Fighter pilots now patrol constantly, radios tuned to any warning. In war games henceforth, commanders emphasize that when the instruments cry out, the only safe response is to listen. In the months after the attack, American scientists pour resources into radar research, higher frequencies, smoother displays, better antennas. By the end of World War II, radar will guide aircraft in the fog over Europe and track missiles in the Pacific. In textbooks, engineers and officers repeat the story of Lockard and Elliott as the example of why early warning must be respected. Trust your scope, later commanders will say. Trust the dots. The ripple effect goes further still. When peace finally comes, Pearl Harbor's lesson carries into the Cold War. Across the Arctic, a chain of radar stations, the distant early warning line, is built to spot any Soviet bomber coming over the pole. Giant computers on land monitor countless screens, scrambling jets with every alert. Every military academy cadet from that point learns the phrase, "Radar never lies, only men do." Winston Churchill's line about being ready for the unexpected is echoed with a nod to the two lonely soldiers who watched and recorded a warning on a green screen. By the time satellites can scan continents, the principle remains. If something huge is headed your way, you want a machine to tell you. Even today, the story endures. On December 7th every year, ceremonies across America honor those lost, and someone usually mentions the quiet watchers on the hill. Visitors at the Pearl Harbor Museum not only pause by battleship road displays, but sometimes point out to the nearby landmark of Opana Ridge. There stands a simple plaque commemorating the first radar operators. Young children reading the text learn that two men saw the enemy coming. Historians tell them that even though no planes took off in response, the privates' vigilance was not in vain. It forced the military to change course. Decades after the war, veterans like Joe Lockard and George Elliott will be invited to speak at reunions or on television documentaries. Lockard, the engineer, often leans forward earnestly when asked, "What was that morning like?" He usually answers, "Cold and quiet, just another shift," until it wasn't. Elliott, chuckling, might add, "I still don't know how they thought it was our guys." In the end, the day's tragedy becomes also a lesson. The irony is not lost on anyone. One of America's great victories in this story was almost silent. The radar did exactly what it was supposed to do, and that faith in technology has been repaid countless times since, from guiding wartime aircraft to watching for forest fires on quiet nights. Pearl Harbor reminds us that sometimes it is the smallest blips of evidence that warn of the greatest dangers. It is a powerful moral. Never ignore what the instruments tell you. Today, the warriors of radar still stand their watches in deserts, mountains, and space. In those high-tech command centers, a photograph of Lockard and Elliott quietly hangs on the wall of honor alongside more famous names. Their story is taught, told, and retold to every new generation of air defenders. On clear nights on Oahu, when the stars wheel overhead and the ocean is quiet, one can still imagine two young men on that green hill watching a dark horizon. The memory of the morning they stood their ground and the cost of what happened next lives on as a lasting testament to vigilance and the imperative to listen. In the end, they did hear the warning of their fate. Their greatest service became teaching the world never to ignore the quiet voice of truth.